government member voting representative process, the I-Codes development process, and that entire process is wrapping up right now. In fact, online voting for the final decisions about what will be in and what will not be in the 2021 I-Codes, that voting starts today. So that's what we're going to focus on today. I hope this is, I hope all of you are registered to vote, all of you who are government members whose cities or counties or whatever your jurisdiction is has registered to be an ICC member, and you all are registered as GMVRs. So without further ado, let's move on. Well, we will move on in just a second. There we go. Okay, so I think you all pretty much understand the ICC Code Development process. It's a 3-year process driven by ICC that's open to just about everybody. And this is, this is the way it works. Initially, about 2 years before a code is published, there's a call for people to volunteer to be committee members. And then once the committee applications have all been sent in, there's a call for proposed code changes. And then we have the committee hearings and goes on down the line until we get to where we are on the next to last line, the final GMVR online voting. And the new code will be published sometime in the middle of next year. So there we go. So the public comment hearing was held in Las Vegas last week in October. And like I said earlier, the final GMVR voting, the online voting, is scheduled to begin today. And we're going to look at the voting process, how the voting actually works. We're going to look at a summary of the high priority energy code proposals and public comments, the ones that we've identified as high priority, and what the recommendations are on those. We've taken our recommendations from the Energy Efficient Codes Coalition. They are an organization, a program of the Alliance to Save Energy that works on energy code development and has for the last 15 years or so. And SPEER participates in their technical committee, and so we're involved throughout the process with them on trying to understand what the effects of the code change proposals, what the effects, how the public comments would affect those code change proposals, and what will actually move energy efficiency forward through the code change process. And those are the recommendations we'll be talking about. The high priority proposals that we're going to focus on are some of the ones that we've selected. And after this webinar, we'll be sending out their entire summary of all the energy code proposals. So at the public comment hearings, I wanted to step back a little bit and look at that. So like I said, these were in Las Vegas from the 23rd to the 30th of October. There's actually not a committee, only a moderator and the participants who choose to attend the hearing. It's an open hearing, and anybody can attend. But there is electronic voting at this hearing, and only validated government member voting representatives, and from here on out, I'll be just referring to those as GMVRs, who are at the hearing can vote. It's electronic ballot, so each registered GMVR who's at the hearing gets a little electronic voting tool, and they're able to vote on the process. Now, the voting at the hearings is not final. It helps to establish the timelines or the agenda, and it helps to kind of set the direction for the final government consensus ballot, which is the other word for GMVRs. And after that, we have about a 2-week period where ICC goes through all of the public comments, all of the everything that was voted on at Las Vegas, and puts those into a format where it's easy for folks to vote, well, relatively easy for folks to vote on. And that's a big part of what we're going to talk about today. The first thing at the public comment hearing and on your agenda when you go to vote on GMVR is the consent agenda. And that will be all of the code change proposals that were acted on at the committee action hearings that did not have a successful assembly action or floor motion and did not receive a public comment. So if a code change proposal was voted on and rejected at the public comment hearings, it'll be on this agenda to reject or to disapprove. If it was acted on as submitted with no changes, it will also be on this consent agenda, and all of these are compiled, and there'll just be one vote, yes or no, up or down. And the reason that they do this is people have had a couple of opportunities, both at the committee action hearing to make a floor motion, and then later to add a public comment if they felt strongly that one of these code change proposals should be changed, if the committee got it wrong, basically. And if nobody has taken the time or made the effort to actually make a public comment or push for a floor motion, then they assume that there's no big pushback against it and there's an opportunity to vote yes or no. I don't know that this has ever been not approved. I think they've always been approved, and that's probably the way it should be. Like I said, these are the non-controversial, the ones that there's not a lot of argument, a lot of discussion about, and so they just go through on the consent agenda. Now, what the public comment hearing is looking at is all of the code change proposals, from the beginning of the process that have had either a public comment made on them. So say a code change proposal was submitted to the committee action hearings or through the process. It was voted on to be approved, and then during the public comment period, somebody submitted a comment. Let's say that proposal was to raise wall insulation, and this is purely hypothetical. This code change proposal doesn't exist. That the code change proposal was to raise the wall insulation in climate zone 2 to R15. And that went through the committee, probably wouldn't have gone through the committee, but let's just say that it did for the sake of argument, and was moving forward. And you out there decided, well, I don't want that. I think R13 is right. So you made a public comment. So that would now be part of the public comment hearings because it has a public comment attached to it. Or if you were at the committee action hearings and you push for a floor motion, an assembly action, it's called either an assembly action or a floor motion, to change that to R13, and that floor motion was successful, then it would also be part of the public comment hearing. So any code change, basically any code change proposal that went through, that was acted on by the committee in the committee action hearings, and then had some kind of action taken later, either a floor motion or a public comment, those are what we're going to be voting on. This is what you all are going to be voting on over the next couple of weeks. And I think I pretty much explained this. Public comments, like I said, well, I don't think I did say, public comments can be made to modify a proposal. So like we were talking about, change R15 back to R13, or they can just make to disapprove whatever the committee action vote was. You can make a public comment, just say disapprove and give your reason for that, and that will be your public comment. The actions on public comments are to approve the proposal as it was submitted, AS, approve it as it was modified by the committee action hearing, AM, approve as modified by a new public comment. So that comment you sent in that said, you know, change this back to R13, that's AMPC, or just disapprove the standing motion, and that's D. Now, the standing motion is important here. You may not actually be voting on the terms of, on the wording of the proposal. You may be voting to approve or disapprove what the committee did. So if the committee approved something, and then so if a committee disapproved something, the standing motion is to disapprove that item, to disapprove changing R13 to R15. And what you're voting on is to disapprove that standing motion. So what you would be voting on in that case would be to go ahead with R15. Let me explain that a little bit. So this is, these are again hypothetical. Actually, they're from the last round of code changes. So, you know, this is kind of what it will look like. You'll have the proposal number, and it'll be either RE, residential energy, or CE, commercial energy. And then you'll have what the standing motion is. It'll be either to approve as submitted, approve as modified, or disapprove. Those are the ones that can move forward. And you'll have some kind of summary of it. And this one, we'll just say it's increased wall insulation. And then you have a public comment that would change the original proposal. So let's say this one is our wall insulation, changing it to from R13 to R15, and the committee disapproved that. So the standing motion is to disapprove. And somebody has submitted a comment that said delete footnote J. We won't discuss what footnote J is, but that's what the public comment is. So if you like this proposal, RE26, the way it was originally submitted, to change wall insulation to R15, you'll disapprove the public, and you don't want to add that public comment. You think the footnote is necessary. You'll vote D to disapprove the public comment. You'll act on the public comment first, and then you'll vote D to disapprove the standing motion. So that's where it gets a little bit confusing. You're voting on the standing motion, not on the proposal in this case. So the standing motion was to disapprove it, and you're voting to disapprove the standing motion, which means that you're voting to approve the code change proposal. If you think R26 is better with the public comment and you like it, you know, moving forward with that, you'll approve it you'll approve the public comment, and then you will vote AMPC, approve as modified by the public comment on the whole motion. Now, since the original motion was to disapprove and you're voting to change that, this will take a higher percentage. This will take a 2/3 vote to make that happen. So if you didn't like the original R26 and you don't think the public comment helps, you'll vote to disapprove the public comment, and you'll vote to approve as submitted the standing motion. That means you're approving the disapprove line. Okay? So things that you need to remember, there can be multiple public comments. You may have to read through, I think there's one proposal that has like 7 or 8 public comments. RE7 on lighting has a bunch of public comments. The vote on the public comments is what comes first, and then after you voted on the public comments, you vote on the standing motion. So if you voted to, let's say you were looking at RE7 and you looked at all 6 or 7 of those public comments, and you chose one of them, and you said you liked that public comment, then your vote on the standing motion would be to approve as modified by a public comment, AMPC. So, and those are the possible votes there. You can approve as submitted, disapprove, or approve the original code change proposal as it was modified by the committee action hearing, that would be AM, or approve as modified by the public comment. I know this is all a little bit confusing in this context. This slide, this PowerPoint will be available if you want to see it. There is a tutorial on the ICC website when you sign up to vote. So I think it will be pretty clear once you get into it if you haven't done that before. So that's the voting process. We're going to talk now about some of the recommendations. And like I said earlier, we're using the Energy Efficient Code Coalition's summary of actions and their recommendations for how to vote. We think that they do a really good job of evaluating the code change proposals and the public comments, and we think they're real concerned with improving energy efficiency. So our position throughout this will be that that proposals that are within reason, that improve the efficiency of the code, are what we should be voting on. You may not totally agree with that, but that's the position that we take, and basically that's our job. We are the South Central Partnership for Energy Efficiency as a Resource after all, and they are the Energy Efficient Codes Collaborative. So EECC is made up of RIOs, other organizations like us, Regional Energy Efficiency Organizations, so SPEER and SWEEP and SIA and all the other ones around the country that do the kind of work that we do. Affordable housing groups, utilities, manufacturers, environmental groups, and lots of others. So that it's a pretty broad group of people that participates in this, and they're all focused on energy efficiency for one reason or another. Like I said, the technical committee reviews the code change proposals and the public comments and makes these recommendations, and then they publish these recommendations when time for GMVR voting comes up. And we will be sending out, I think I said earlier, the full set of recommendations right after this webinar to all of you and probably a few more people. So let's look at the ones that we've identified as high priority, and we're going to start with the ones that we think should be approved. And what you're going to see here is pretty much what I was showing you before. You're going to see the code change proposal number, what happened at the committee action hearing, what happened at the public comment hearing, and what our recommendation is. And then we're going to give you a real brief analysis of this. So I spoke about RE7 earlier. RE7 will change the definition, will improve lighting efficiency by changing the definition of high efficacy lighting. So previously, the watts per lumen was based on the wattage of the bulb. So if your bulb was over 60 watts, it had to have 40 watts per lumen. If it was less than that, it might have had to have 65. I don't have the table in front of me, but this basically changes all high efficacy lighting to be 65 lumens per watt. And that makes sense. The lighting industry has changed that much that we think this really works, and it won't be a challenge to the industry at all. Committee action hearing agreed. They said to approve it as submitted. There was a public comment from the proposer. This is the one that had 6 or 7 public comments. We think public comment number 1 was the best one. And like I said, it was from the people who originally proposed it. And so our recommendation is to vote AMPC 1, approve as modified by public comment number 1. RE20 requires the energy certificate it says energy certification. I was typing this kind of in a hurry. Requires the energy certificate to include the code edition and the compliance path. The committee didn't like this. But at the public comment hearing, the group on the floor thought this one should be approved as modified again by public comment 1. There were 2 or 3 public comments on this one, and that's our recommendation. Approve it as modified by public comment 1. RE21 adds HVAC, some insulation area weighted averages for insulation and fenestration, and ERI scores, if any, to the certificate. This was disapproved by the committee and disapproved at the PCH hearing, but we actually think this should be approved. This is an uphill battle. It'll take a 2/3 vote to approve this, but our recommendation is to vote as submitted, approve as submitted. RE29 increases our insulation in climate zones 4 and 5. So for us, it would affect Oklahoma and the Panhandle, but it would increase that insulation from 13 plus 5, our 13 cavity plus 5 continuous to 20 plus 5 or 13 plus 10. Again, you can see the votes. Committee action hearing disapproved, PCH hearing disapproved. Our recommendation is to vote as submitted. RE35 would change window U from 0.32 down to 0.30 in climate zones 3 and 4. The committee actually approved this as submitted. There was a public comment added, and we think our recommendation is to vote AMPC 1. RE112. This one requires ducts that are completely within the thermal envelope, which would, under the current code, would be exempt from testing, to be tested, and raises the threshold for them to 8 CFM per square foot, as opposed to the standard 4 CFM per square foot, which is for ducts outside the thermal envelope. One of the things that we've seen in a lot of research is that the main reason we get low testing numbers is that the installers know that they're going, that we get low leakage numbers is that the installers know that they're going to be tested. So in some of our research in Kentucky in particular, where they have a lot of ducts that are, of houses that are built with the ducts completely within the thermal envelope, we had some of the worst duct leakage testing that we saw. So knowing that these ducts weren't going to be tested, people kind of slacked off on their installation. So we think it's important that ducts that are even within the thermal envelope be tested. And it's okay to raise that level a little bit up to 8 CFM instead of 4 CFM. We think this would really improve energy efficiency and comfort in houses. All of the actions so far have been to approve this as submitted, including committee action. So RE148, this would require multifamily buildings of 3 stories or less, so that are covered by the residential energy code, to comply with the commercial exterior lighting requirements. So lighting requirements in the residential portion of the code for, are not very stringent. So we think it's probably a good idea to add this, and the committee disapproved this. Again, there were several public comments. Our recommendation is to approve it, and the PCH recommendation was to approve it as modified by public comments 1 and 2. RE151. Currently, there's not really an envelope backstop in the performance path for the residential performance path. So this would say that any home built using the performance path would have to have insulation and air sealing and fenestration requirements at least equivalent to the 2009 IECC. This was disapproved by the committee. It was disapproved, voted disapproved at the public comment hearings, but we're saying it should be approved as submitted. RE 204. So this has to do with renewable energy credits. Part of the ERI trade-off allows for a certain amount of renewable energy to be part of code compliance if you're using the ERI. And one of the concerns about this is that renewable energy credits actually have value. They're tradable on a couple of different markets. And if those credits are sold, that means they can be used to offset, say, a utilities emissions requirement or a utilities renewable energy requirements from the state. So we think that if they're used, if renewable energy credits or if that renewable energy is used to meet code compliance, the credit should not be allowed to be used to meet some other requirement by a utility or by a city or by maybe by a builder even. So again, this was disapproved at both of the hearings, but we think this is, I think this is a really important one and should be approved. Now we got a package here, RE 206, 207, and 209. All three of these add an energy options package system to the residential code. This is similar to the commercial code where you have the alternative energy options and you have to choose one of those to do that. This is more a points-based system. 206 and 207 require 5 points. We require a residence to meet 5 points on this scale. 209 requires 10 points. Again, this is met with some disapproval from the committee hearings, but eventually I think we need to move in this direction. We're reaching a level with insulation and fenestration where it's going to be harder and harder to get more gains out of the energy code. And so it's kind of time to start looking at some alternatives on how we're going to move forward with reaching some of the goals for reduced energy use, reduced emissions, all of the things that a lot of different cities are looking at. And one way to do that is to add these kinds of energy options packages. So those are the residential proposals that we think that should be approved. There are a couple here that we think should not be approved. A couple that we feel pretty strongly about. RE 10 would allow sampling. So for your testing, for your envelope and duct testing, it would allow, and if you're using some kind of HERS compliance package other than ERI, it would allow a batch of homes to be sampled. So one home could be tested out of a group of 7 that are all ready to be tested or are all ready for their final inspections at one time. Basically, you'd test one, and if that one passes, you say that all 7 of these houses pass. We think that's a really bad idea. Austin tried this in 2008, 2009, and we went back and hired some contractors to do research on the houses that were sampled but not tested. And what we found was that there was a real big difference in the testing results from the ones that were not tested than from the ones that were tested. So the committee approved this. The PCH hearing disapproved it. We're strongly recommending disapproval of this. We think in general, sampling is a bad thing. RE 43 was also a sampling proposal, and even the committee disapproved this. Both committees disapproved, or both hearings disapproved this, and we're recommending disapproval. Now, RE95 is also a sampling proposal. I put it in the nose just because I wanted to keep all of the sampling the same. But it only allows sampling of multifamily units within a single building. And it requires that a minimum of 15% have to be tested. And it's real similar to what an amendment that's been approved at NCT COG, North Texas Council of Governments, is using, and it's very similar to the way Austin works with multifamily testing. So we're actually going against the IECC, and we're saying that we think this one is probably okay. Though both committees disapproved it. Use your own judgment in this. So that's all I'll say about it. RE40. RE40 is pretty contentious in climate zones 3 through 8, where R20 wall insulation is required, so R20 or 13+5. This would allow R18 in place of the R20 if the framing factor was less than 20. Now there's a footnote that talks about 24-inch on center walls, and it's real unclear if that footnote means that you know, anything that's 24 inches OC would be the equivalent of less than 20% framing factor, and that's just not the case. Framing factor is much more complicated than to say it's just 24 inches on center. So we think this is a poorly written proposal, and we think calculating framing factors is difficult to do, even if the architect calculates that framing factor. We don't know what's actually going to happen on site, and unless it's really framed well, you're not going to get below 20. So we're suggesting, the committee said approve this as submitted. PCH hearing disapproved it, and we're recommending disapproval of this. So R19, I say it allows texting, but it's actually testing of duct leakage to the outside. So we have two types of duct leakage, total duct leakage and duct leakage to the outside. This is an issue that comes up every code change hearing, and testing to the outside it is based on the belief that as long as conditioned air stays within the building, it's okay, that it meets the purpose, but that's basically saying that if you dumped all of your conditioned air into the living room and didn't put any in any of the bedrooms, your house would be just as efficient, and that's obviously not true. So it needs to be, we need to continue with total duct leakage testing, and a lot of people would say we need to go to air balancing as well, but that's not part of these proposals. So committee voted to approve this as submitted. PCH and we are both recommending disapprove this. It's really a bad idea. A couple more on the no side. RE 156 and 176 would allow a trade-off in the performance path for HVAC efficiency and on-site renewables. This also is an item that comes up almost every code change. This was allowed prior to 2009. HVAC efficiency was allowed to be traded. The concern is that the code should really focus on the envelope and the permanent parts of the building. HVAC system will last about 15 years, and we have no control over what will be installed later. Renewables will last 20 years. So the committee voted to disapprove this, PCH voted to disapprove this, and we're recommending disapproval. We think trade-offs for HVAC and on-site renewables are simply a bad idea any way you look at it. RE 190 and 196 would weaken the envelope backstop in the ERI. Currently, the code says that regardless of what other improvements you make when using the ERI path, you have to meet the envelope requirements of the 2015 IECC. And so we think that should stay the same. 190 deals with renewables, adds it to the scoring. So the committee, PCH, and we all recommend that this not be approved. RE 208 is another one similar to the recommendations to have efficiency option packages, but it's a point-based table and it allows trade-offs for heating, cooling, and water heating. So we think this is, we and both of the hearings think this is a bad idea. And so we're recommending disapproval on this. So I think those are our residential recommendations. So these are the ones we picked out as our priority. So like I said, we're going to be sending out the entire list, but we think these should be the focus. If your time is limited, focus on these. And if you have questions on other proposals that are in the entire list, you can email or call us. Jason and I would be happy to deal with those. So let's look at the commercial recommendations. So first, again, the positive ones, CE9 Part 2. For whatever reason in the commercial recommendations, we get a lot of Part 1 and Part 2s. Seldom see that in residential proposals. So this one, this is based on scope, and it just adds energy efficiency to the considerations that have to be reviewed when the code official is reviewing alternative materials or designs or methods for approval. Currently, energy efficiency isn't listed as one of the things that should be. We think since it's the energy code, it makes sense that energy efficiency be included in that list of things that should be reviewed. Committee voted disapprove, PCH, and we both recommend voting as submitted. CE12, it makes 2009 the envelope table backstop. The envelope table from the 2009 IECC, the backstop for any above code compliance paths. So if a building is doing Energy Star or LEED and those are, or something like that, and those are alternative paths under whatever program you're on, it just means that 2009, you have to meet the 2009 envelope requirements regardless of what that above code program says. You can see our recommendations there as submitted. We like this one. We're pretty strong on having backstops. We think the envelope is the most important part of the building for energy efficiency, and so these are the kind of changes that we will generally support. So CE49, so currently in the performance path, your proposed design has to meet 85% of the total energy use, or 15% less than the total energy use than your standard reference design. This one, that's the current requirement. This one would change that to 80% or 20% better than the standard reference design. And the reason for this, of course, is the alternative efficiency option packages. So this was disapproved at both hearings, but we think it's a pretty good measure. So DE 61, 63, and 64 again, we're talking about the commercial code. So these would change the wall, the roof, and the below grade wall insulation levels to be the same that's in ASHRAE 90.1. Since 90.1 is the alternative compliance path, the committee thought this was a good one. PCH voted to approve it, and we're recommending voting to approve as submitted. I think it's time to move these insulation levels up a little bit. So CE 96 requires air leakage testing for most mid and high-rise, for all mid and high-rise residential units. So air leakage testing is already required for multifamily. This was modified by the committee, but it's basically still that proposal, and the committee voted to approve it. PCH voted to approve it, and we're recommending voting to approve as modified by the committee. So CE 97 requires air leakage testing of most non-residential and high occupancy buildings in the commercial code. Currently, testing is optional for just about all buildings, in the commercial code. So we think that a lot of these buildings could be tested. And there are some exceptions where testing is not required. You can see those in the proposal. CE 99 requires a review and a commissioning report for your air barrier systems. So, currently we just have a list of materials or systems that can be used to create the air barrier. This would formalize that process a little bit more and require a commissioning report. And if you're not doing testing, this is a really good idea, because we know that commercial buildings are just a lot leakier than residential buildings since we started testing residential buildings. So something needs to be done, either more testing or this commissioning report for air barrier systems, and both would not be a bad idea. Committee and PCH all agreed with this, so we think it has a good chance of moving forward. CE 111 adds fault detection and diagnostic requirements for certain, not all, but some large HVAC systems, and excludes R1 and R2 occupancy. So it doesn't apply to multifamily. And so the committee liked this, both hearings like this, and we're recommending approve this as well. A couple more that we're recommending. CE 17 Part 1 adds a requirement for electric vehicle charging and changes the definitions related to electric vehicles. This is really creating electric vehicle charging infrastructure. Committee liked it, PCH liked it. We're recommending to approve it as modified by the committee. CE 217 Part 2 adds that same kind of requirement to mid and high-rise residential buildings. Committee voted to disapprove this, PCH voted to disapprove this, but we think that's a good idea. If you're going to do it for other commercial occupancies, probably where you're going to have the most need or the most desire for electric vehicle charging is going to be in those residential buildings. And once the building is built, it is really hard to add those charging systems. It gets really expensive, and running the conduit all through their parking garages makes it really, really hard. So we think it should be approved. CE 218 and 226 replace the additional energy efficiency option packages with a new point-based system. We think this one kind of makes sense, so we're recommending that we adopt that one as well. So we have a couple of these, a couple of commercial recommendations that we're pretty strongly opposed to. CE1 through CE7 all say, a little bit of different things, but all of those would change the intent of the IECC. The first group, CE1 Part 2, CE3, CE5 Part 2, CE6 Part 1, and CE7 Part 2 would change the intent of the IECC by reducing the focus on energy efficiency. And remember, these are changes to scope, and words are important. So the committee disapproved this, PCA's disapproved it, and we think it should be disapproved as well. CE1 Part 1 adds energy using systems outside the scope of, outside the building structure to the scope of the IECC. Both of the hearings approved this. We think it's a bad idea. You vote the way you think best, but we think it's a bad idea. CE5 and CE7, both Part 1, change the scope of the IECC to include energy storage. And the energy storage sections are different, and that would make it different from the residential section. And you know, we strongly support renewable energy, but we're just not to the point where we think that renewable energy and storage should be an important part of the energy code. We think it's an important part of energy efficiency. We think it's an important part of moving forward toward our goals. But once we start putting it in the code, we haven't found that balance yet where we can make sure that the building itself is as efficient as it should be and include renewable energy and storage in this part of the code. So we're recommending against this. CE 104 would delete the requirement to seal and insulate rooms with fuel burning appliances. I think this only applies in climate zones 3, 4, and 5, so it doesn't apply to climate zone 2. We think that's really important. I would prefer to see that expanded to climate zone 2. So both of the hearings, and we all say this is a bad idea. So these are just the high priority proposals that we've chosen to talk about today, the ones we think deserve the most attention. And we think every one of these will improve both the energy efficiency and the enforcement of the code. Hopefully you will look at those, you'll agree with us, and you'll vote to make the ICC a better, stronger, more enforceable code. Like I said, we'll send the full set of proposals out a little bit later today. And whether you agree with me or not, vote. I think it's really important that we get that out there, that not enough GMVRs are voting. This process is really heavily weighted to trade associations, manufacturers, and others in the early process, in the early part of the process. And this final online voting is when the code officials, the people who are on the ground, who really know the code, know how it's enforced, know how it can be enforced, and know what the impacts are, and who are really concerned about their own communities, whose primary concern is their own communities. This is your opportunity to vote. And so, like I said, whether you agree with our recommendations or not, try to get out there and vote. And we've got a few minutes for questions, if we have any, Liz.
Thanks, Richard. Let's see. Everyone is still on. I don't see any questions. So unless anyone has any at the moment, I think that will be it. Richard, that was great. And just a reminder to everyone, this will be on our YouTube page in the next couple of days. If not by the end of the week. So you can go ahead and review it, as Richard had mentioned, since there is kind of some detail and depth to this. And also, as I mentioned before this webinar began, I will send out a course evaluation to everyone who attended today's webinar. And if you do want an ICC certificate, please fill out that evaluation. Our next webinar will be in December, and that will be presented by Jason with SPEER. I will send out that invitation as it gets closer. And thank you again for taking some time out of your morning to join us. I hope everyone has a great day. Thank you, Richard.
Thank you all.